Hey guys, so I've been wanting to do this for a little while now. And I want to go over the case. The sorry. I want to go over our federal case. Now, below this video, I'm going to have this case file. Plus, it's broken into two parts, so I apologize for that. It's in part 1 and part 2. I also have pictures of the bruises that were on the back of Iris's hands that I took. These bruises happened some point after CPS took Iris on April 25th, and we still don't have an answer for what caused them, but it is clear as day in the pictures. You can see it. There's clearly a needle mark in her hands. So those were obviously some form of IVs or something that were put in Iris's hands after DSS took her. We still have yet to receive an answer for that. So attached below are the pictures of the bruises, as well as this case broken into two parts. And I apologize if I seem a bit nervous. This is only very nerve-wracking, so please forgive me. Also, I'm putting this case below because I want everybody to know the tactics and techniques that CPS uses to take our children, and I will eventually get into it, but what happens to them after the fact. I want to highlight how these cases are opened under fraudulent circumstances, and I want to show how the vast majority of child removals done by CPS are found to have been unsubstantiated. And that's about almost 90% of child removals are undone within the first 6 months. Why is that? Let me show you what happens when you ask for medical records and what medical records shows you. And I encourage each and every one of you, please, go to the Department of Justice, put in a Freedom of Information Act request, and ask for anything related to yourself and your child. All of it. Because we need full disclosure. We need complete transparency. And it starts with you demanding it. So, I'm not going to read this word for word, but I'm going to try and briefly go into everything to explain everything, and you can review it in more detail if you want. Click the downloads below. So, ultimately this was brought to the Court of Federal Claims. The reason why I picked the Court of Federal Claims is because due to the fact that Iris was removed from our care under fraudulent circumstances and was brought across state lines multiple times, and the state of Maryland has done nothing to intervene and has done nothing to stop this, shows that the state of Maryland is clearly not capable of investigating itself and of holding its own people accountable. So the only way to have accountability is to go above their heads. And that's what I've done. Sorry. In this case, the following constitutional rights have been violated by the aforementioned parties, which includes the United States government, Howard County General Hospital, Baltimore County Department of Social Services, Greater Baltimore Medical Center, Baltimore County Circuit Court, Baltimore County Police Department, and the state of Maryland. The following constitutional rights have been violated. The Fourth Amendment, The right of people to secure their persons, houses, papers, and effects against unreasonable searches and seizures shall not be violated, and no warrant shall issue but upon probable cause supported by both oath and affirmation, and particularly describing the place to be searched and the persons or things to be seized. Due to the false statements from Howard County General Hospital, the Department of Social Services / CPS opened a fraudulent substance-exposed newborn case, which ultimately resulted in the removal of Jennifer Guskin's infant daughter, Iris McFalls, from her family due to Iris McFalls from her family. The Fifth Amendment. No person shall be held to answer for a capital or infamous crime unless on a presentment or indictment of grand jury, except in the cases arising in the land of naval forces or in the militia, or in actual service time of war or public danger. Nor shall any person be subject to the same offense to be twice put in jeopardy of life or limb, nor shall be compelled in any criminal case to be witness against himself, nor deprived of life, liberty, or property without due process of law, nor shall private property be taken for public use without just jurisdiction. And the 14th Amendment. All persons born or naturalized in the United States are subject to the jurisdiction thereof, are citizens of the United States and of the state wherein they reside. No state shall make or enforce any law which shall abridge on the privileges or immunities of citizens of the United States, nor shall any deprive any person of life, liberty, or property without the due process of law, nor deny any person within its jurisdiction equal protection of the laws. This was violated multiple times over and over, and it continues to be violated by the state of Maryland and Baltimore County. Statement of facts. Despite the fact that Jennifer Guskin tested negative for controlled substances attached to item 1 upon Iris's birth, Baltimore County Department of Social Services Child Advocacy Center opened a substance-exposed newborn case, ignored a medical diagnosis, tongue and lip tie, explaining Iris's lack of weight gain, took Iris against medical advice and under false pretenses, made her extremely ill, requiring IVs, hid exculpatory evidence, altered medical records, and a myriad of other illegal activities in an attempt to conceal the fraudulent nature of this case. Now, from the beginning, everybody involved was informed that I am a journalist, and that anything that they say can and will be up for public scrutiny, and will be up to the court of public opinion. Going forward, by proceeding with this, each and every party involved knew that they were dealing with somebody who is a journalist, and that anything they did was subject to public distribution. So they consented to this being made public in every shape and form. So, that being said, part of being a journalist, I said that I wanted all of Iris's medical records. I wanted all the documentation related to everything that they were doing. I wanted every piece of information. And each time I requested medical records from CPS, each and every request was met with belittlement of mental health. DSS at no point questioned my mental health until I questioned the decisions of DSS and demanded documentation and the names and reasoning for their decision making. Only when I asked for accountability and to know who was making what decisions and why, only then did my mental health come into question. You know, I'm going to go off on a slight tangent here, but it needs to be said. CPS is just like the DNC. With CPS, If you ask for proof and documentation, they scream mental health, mental health, mental health. The DNC, when you ask for documentation, they scream Russia, Russia, Russia. It's amazing how much these two ultimately end up having in common, isn't it? Especially considering that it was Bill Clinton himself who signed in a law giving social workers bonuses for each child they take and adopt out. So social workers, these judges, these clerks, these lawyers, are all getting paid for each of these children who were in state care. But that's a bit of a tangent. Something that needs to be said. Now, I'm not going to get into this too much because this isn't about me. This isn't about my past. This isn't about my history. This is just something that everybody needs to know for court record, either the court of whatever bullshit court or the court of public opinion. Jennifer Guskin has been diagnosed with post-traumatic stress disorder from her history of being trafficked through Child Protective Services adoption program. Ms. Guskin spent much of her childhood being raped and tortured by high-profile individuals. Ms. Guskin has witnessed and been victim of high-profile people within the upper echelons of society being forced to rape children on camera under threat of death for themselves and their loved ones. This included lawyers, doctors, teachers, police officers, military personnel, athletes, celebrities, businessmen, and congressmen, some of whom still serve in office today. Now that ties in with all the bonuses and stuff that's going on there. That ties in with how a CPS opening a fraudulent case can digress into a 4-month-old infant being brought into foster care for 7 months. This is how this digresses from an infant being taken away from their parents forever, based on one bullshit lie. How many children were taken from their parents? How many families were destroyed on one bullshit lie? And that's something that people are going to have to get ready to have coming forward. Because we're going to find out that a lot of these terminations, a lot of these situations of children being put in foster care were complete bullshit. And we're going to hold people accountable for it. Now, timeline of events. To go back on a slightly personal. As soon as Scott and I found out we were pregnant, we switched to an organic diet. I ate as healthy as possible because I knew that I wanted to take care of the life growing in me, and I know the crap that's in our food. So I wanted to make sure that I ate organic, so that way Iris ate organic. We imported organic diapers and wipes from Denmark. And CPS knew this. So without further ado, I'm going to start getting into the timeline of events. From Iris's birth to where we are now. And where we are now, knowing that this case was completely fraudulent, should make you wonder, what the fuck is going on? December 29th, 2017. Jennifer Guskin gave birth to Iris McFalls at home. Iris was delivered by her father, Scott. Jennifer Guskin tests negative for controlled substances. DSS opens a substance-exposed newborn case. Now within this, I have the test results as you can see, I tested negative for everything. Now, a DSS came to the house on December 31st. We were not allowed to bring Iris home from the hospital unless DSS did a walkthrough of our house after they opened up a fraudulent case. Oh, I think I'm going to do that. That's going to be fun. That's going to be very fun. Upon initial interview, Jennifer Guskin informed Miss Jones that Miss Guskin is a human trafficking survivor who used her experience to become an independent journalist and political analyst with a passion for law and naturopathy. Any and all further action DSS takes will be recorded and subject to public release and scrutiny. Miss Jones expressed understanding of this statement. Now, I go into how throughout having Iris through her infancy, she wasn't gaining weight as quickly as she was supposed to. She was gaining length. She was alert. She was active. She was aware. She was responsive. No signs of distress whatsoever. She was on the breast a lot, and I didn't care. Honestly, I had, as soon as as we had decided to keep Iris, because that's another tangent I'm not getting into right now. I, like many parents, came to the conclusion that my life was now about my child, and that every moment of my life was going to be about Iris. So I had no problem with her being on my breast pretty much 24/7. I enjoyed that bonding experience. But she wasn't gaining weight. When we brought this up to the doctors, all three of them said to take a baby who is not gaining weight, feed her less often. I was feeding her on demand. Whenever she would show hunger signs, like reach for her mouth or start rooting for the breast, I would feed her. No hesitation. None. And then I'm told to go from doing that to feeding her every 2 to 3 hours, to cut down her feeding and give her formula. But she's not taking the formula. She doesn't like the formula. Keep trying. So take a baby who's not gaining weight, feed them less, and only feed them something that they don't want to eat. What? 3 doctors. None of them thought to check Iris for a tongue and lip tie. But I'll get back into that. Ultimately, after firing the 3rd doctor for incompetence and ineptitude, DSS decides that that's not acceptable. And on April 6, 2018, DSS comes to my house to take Iris. They did not have a warrant, so they failed to do so. Remember, guys, if these people come, regardless of what they say, if they do not have a warrant, they do not have the right to your child. Your child can stay in your arms, can stay in your car, and they do not have the right to seize your child without a warrant. That's a problem. Because a lot of children have been getting seized without warrants, just like Iris was when she was taken from the hospital. But I'll get into that later. Now, when this was going on, you'll see this. You'll read this here. CPS decided to initiate a 5-hour tactical standoff where the Baltimore County Police Department had the house circled with police cars because they were told some sort of ridiculousness about how we were abusive, drug addict. I don't know what they were told, to be perfectly honest. Subsequent conversations with the officers make me think that they were told that I am violent, addicted, lunatic. Lunatic, yeah, maybe. Yeah, I can definitely see that. Violent and addicted? No. Sorry. No. That I'm not standing for. And because I'm a journalist, we have libel and slander laws, but that doesn't really matter here right now. The fact that they have the police outside my house, surrounding the entire block for 5 hours at 6 p.m. on a Friday night to take Iris is absurd, unacceptable, disgusting. During that standoff, I had live streamed the ordeal on Facebook. And while we were live streaming, many people suggested having Iris checked for a tongue and lip tie. This is also what CPS likes to call failure to thrive. Failure to thrive, aka tongue and lip tie, is genetic. Tongue and lip tie is ultimately an extra piece of skin under the top lip and under the tongue that causes a baby to burn extra calories while they are breastfeeding. This only really affects breastfeeding babies because the nipple doesn't go that far into the baby's mouth. So the baby has to exert extra calories to eat. And often a big side effect is lack of weight gain, and the baby falls asleep a lot at the breast, which Iris was doing. Now, diagnosing tongue and lip tie can be done in 2 forms. One, a genetic test. It's a gene that, from what I understand, my limited knowledge on the subject, from what I understand, about 50%, if not more, of the human population have tongue and lip tie. Which poses an alarming question. How many failure to thrive babies were children who had tongue and lip tie that CPS ignored? None of these, and tongue and lip tie is as simple as lifting up the child's lip to see if there's an extra piece of skin, or with a genetic test. But even I can diagnose tongue and lip tie. You lift up the lip, is there an extra piece of skin? Right here? This right here? If it's long enough, it can inhibit a child's ability to breastfeed, and that can cause a lack of weight gain. The number 1 cause of slow weight gain in breastfed babies. And yet 3 doctors fail to diagnose it, and CPS is ignoring the diagnosis, but once again, we'll get into that. Iris was diagnosed and treated for tongue and lip tie. This wasn't enough for CPS. They still wanted her brought to the hospital. So, on April 12th, 2018, Iris was brought to Greater Baltimore Medical Center. Now, at GBMC, Greater Baltimore Medical Center, GBMC, we got there, and they tested her blood. And her blood test results came back, from what I understood, overall normal. I was not given the blood test results immediately when I requested them. It took a few days of asking for them to receive them. This should be considered extremely alarming, especially considering that CPS was involved in the case. And GBMC was aware that CPS was involved in the case. And yet, I asked for them to release information to CPS and to be perfectly transparent with CPS. And they were doing that. CPS was getting everything they wanted from GBMC. But I had to ask for 2 days for them to give me a copy of Iris's blood work. This is what I received. Now, the number highlighted in blue, That is April 12th. What is highlighted in red is April 13th. It was brought to my attention. I'll get into this later. You'll notice something very alarming here. Once again, this is below, so if you can't see it in great detail, you can look at the link below. This was taken on April 14th. You can see here, this is flagged. There's one number on April 12th that is off. This was taken on April 12th, one number that is off. This was taken on April 13th, the day after. The day after, Iris went into Greater Baltimore Medical Center. She went from one number being off, 1, 2, 3, 4. The day after, CPS would no longer allow me to make medical decisions on behalf of my daughter. The day that CPS started making medical decisions for Iris. And this, I emailed to Iris's social workers on the case. As you can see here, it is labeled item 6M. This is part of the emails that were sent to them. So they were fully aware of the fact that Iris's health was deteriorating in their care the day after it started happening. And yet, they still kept Iris in GBMC. Now, interestingly, on April 13th, the day that blood work was taken, Iris had extreme projectile vomiting all over the place. I had never seen anybody vomit like that before. I was terrified, and I had begged them to let me start breastfeeding Iris again and to take her off formula. Because the day before, when Iris went into GBMC, they took blood, they put an IV in her arm, and they put a nasogastric tube in her. What a nasogastric tube is it's a tube that's inserted into the nose and it goes down their throat and into their stomach. Even though Iris's blood work was almost perfect on April 12th, they still put an IV in her and they gave her nasogastric tube to force feed her formula. I asked them to give her either donor breast milk or organic formula. They refused. I asked them why. They wouldn't answer. It's amazing how when CPS starts making medical decisions, how quickly a child's health can deteriorate, isn't it? I'll continue. Now, April 12th, we were admitted to the hospital. April 13th, Iris has extreme projectile vomiting. April 20th, we tried the supplemental nursing system. Because throughout this entire time in the hospital, Iris had a complete behavioral aversion to the bottle. She would not take it. She hated it. She wanted nothing to do with it. So for 8 days, they tried to force the bottle down her throat, rather than saying, why don't we let her get back to what she was doing before when she was healthiest? Why don't we let her get her back to breastfeeding? Because clearly she was skinny, but we know why. No, that wasn't good enough. 8 days, CPS wanted to force feed a bottle down her throat. Until April 20th, we tried a supplemental nursing system. Supplemental nursing system is when a bottle is hung over the mother's shoulder and a tube drapes down to the mother's breast. So that way the baby can get both formula and breast milk at the same time. Once again, it was not necessary, but this is what CPS wanted, so this is what CPS got. So we tried the supplemental nursing system, and Iris reluctantly took it. She didn't really care for it. She initially started spitting it out, but I begged her. Yes, I begged my infant to tolerate the supplemental nursing system. On April 21st, the day after Iris started taking the supplemental nursing system reluctantly, a nurse under Dr. Prather came into the room to tell me that Iris's urine output was triple her input. Well, that was also because during this time period I had developed a massive clog in one of my breasts. I had a very clogged duct. And I had asked one of the nurses if she'd be willing to take one of the syringes and actually insert a syringe into the clogged duct and pull out the milk for me. She refused to. So I ended up speaking to the speech and to the specialist overseeing Iris and saying, hey, look, I need to unclog this. This hurts. Can I please breastfeed Iris? So she loosened the restrictions and I was able to breastfeed Iris until my breast was cleared. So Iris's urine output tripled. Wouldn't that indicate that I was producing enough milk? And that milk production wasn't a problem either? So a nurse comes in and tells me that because Iris's urine output tripled, she might have kidney failure. It was at this point I said, fuck this shit. You're not doing anything else to Iris. Give me her formula, give her everything you are feeding her, give me instructions on how to feed her. And you are done doing anything to my daughter. You are done touching her, you are done coming near her. Well, this resulted in GBMC threatening to call the police and CPS if I didn't stop. Lo and behold, they called CPS anyway. So, I'm being told that my daughter might have kidney failure, but CPS is still saying either let us keep treating her, or we'll call the police and tell them that you're getting in the way of us treating her. This is what CPS does to children. Iris was taken from my care because CPS did this, and I questioned it, because I questioned their decision making. April 23rd, 2018. Iris was medically cleared to be discharged and to come home with her parents. Dr. Sparrow, Bethany Kirby, Emily Smith, and a nurse for Greater Baltimore Medical Center were present for a meeting where we were given a care plan. Attached item 8, which we agreed to, everything. And we were medically cleared to go home. But we needed CPS's approval again. Fine. Part of the terms for Iris to come home with us was for me to make an appointment with Iris's pediatrician, whom we were planning on dropping eventually due to her inability to diagnose tongue and lip tie. Now, the pediatrician, I'll get into that, maybe, eventually, I don't know, probably will. Now, the pediatrician, Dr. Fuller at Main Street Pediatrics, failed to diagnose Iris with tongue and lip tie. Ultimately, Main Street Pediatrics is why Iris was taken away from me, and why this deterioration in health occurred. Yeah, well, part of the reason. They're definitely intertwined in all of this, but I'm digressing a little bit. I'll get back to point. So on April 23rd, we had agreed to everything, and I had made a follow-up appointment with Dr. Fuller. And that follow-up appointment was made for the morning of April 25th. That follow-up appointment text message is in here, attached item number 9. April 25th. We're having our meeting with CPS, and ultimately what they said was they wanted us to have a meeting in a separate room, but Iris was to be left with somebody else. We said no. We can have a meeting together, that's fine, but we're not leaving Iris with anybody else. She's staying with us at all times. Well, this caused CPS to decide that they were going to take Iris against medical advice. CPS took Iris, claiming that we did not agree to the plan of care and that we were refusing to cooperate with DSS. Well, I have medical record proof and I have text message proof showing that that information is false. But they ultimately took her, from what I understand, according to the woman who made the decision, Dr. Michelle Chudow, Dr. Michelle Chudow, the woman who was overseeing Iris's care, the one who was making Iris's medical decisions while she was in CPS's care, Dr. Michelle Chudow, Chudow. She's the one who ultimately decided that Iris is to be taken against the specialist against her medical advice and under completely fraudulent and false circumstances. So after we had agreed to the plan of care on April 23rd, 2018, April 25th comes around, CPS says, you didn't agree to the plan of care, we're taking your daughter. So Scott and I run around trying to find an attorney. We ran across somebody, ultimately referred through referral. And we came across somebody, Ralph Sapia. We hired him, paid a retainer. He was about $300 and some odd an hour to get Iris back. Money that we really didn't have much of. Thankfully, my mom was helping. My grandmother had said that she was willing to pay for the legal costs. So I had help that most people don't have. Well, Sapia was getting paid $300 plus an hour. When we met with Mr. Sapia, we didn't have all of this evidence then, but we had presented these emails. Item 6, as I showed you guys partial earlier of the blood work that had been sent to DSS. That is part of item 6, which is part of the email exchange that we had with DSS throughout our stay in the hospital, where throughout this email exchange, they thanked us multiple times for our cooperation. So I showed him this email exchange, which included the medical records. Mr. Sapia would not show any of this evidence to the court. He kept saying, for the first month, this is not the time, this is not the time, this is not the time. How many other attorneys have screwed parents by saying this is not the time to plead your case? This is not the time to present your evidence. This is how entrenched this whole system is. These fuckers are bribed and blackmailed. They need to be the fuck out of office, and they don't deserve pensions. Frankly, they don't deserve to see the light of day. This was a paid attorney. No offense, guys. I'm going to call a spade a spade. I can't imagine the public defenders would be much better. When realistically, all you assholes have to do is pull medical records. And yes, I'm cussing a lot. I don't care. I have the right to be mad right now. All you lazy jerks have to do is pull medical records. That's all you have to do. Sapia refused to. I had to do what I could myself, and what I got from CPS was heavily altered, but I'll get there. Sapia had this information and he withheld it from the court. CPS had this information and they withheld it from the court. My question is, how do you sleep at night? Seriously. How do you monsters sleep at night? All right. Tangent. April 26th, Iris was placed in foster care. DSS presents the statements of Director of Medical Decision of DSS, Dr. Michelle Chudow, who at no point ever saw Iris, Scott, or Jennifer. So DSS also used the word of somebody who never saw us to attempt to make mental health diagnoses to attempt to make a mental health diagnosis on a person that she never saw. How often does this happen again? Even though we had the tongue and lip tied diagnosis, emails and text messages confirming our agreement with the plan of care in cooperation with CPS, and blood work showing that Iris is overall healthy in our care, our lawyers refused to present our evidence. My lawyer, Ralph Sapia. Scott's lawyer, Douglas Wink. Do not use them, ever. And when we get everything pulled from the subpoena, you can bet your asses we're going after you. Because guess what? Going after these agencies doesn't do a single thing. All that does is put the burden of costs on the taxpayer. And the people think, all right, I have the agencies to pay for it. I don't have to worry about it. Oh no, fuckers. I'm going after you personally. Because when people are personally held accountable, they don't want to screw up. And this isn't just an, oops, I made a mistake. This is malicious. This is malicious intent. This is malicious intent. And you need to be held accountable to the fullest extent of the court of law and the court of public opinion. Now, after Iris was taken into foster care, she was placed with her paternal grandmother, Scott's mom, who does not like me. The first thing she had to say about me when she heard about me, girl moving from Long Island, that I'm using Scott for his money. That's the first thing this woman had to say about me. Didn't know anything about me. That was all she had to say. So, okay, that's her preconceived notion. That's what I'm working with here. So, it was concluded that while the state has shelter care, blah, 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 blah. It was concluded that while the state has shelter care, Jennifer Guskin and Scott McFalls are to maintain their parental rights, much to the dismay of CPS's attorney, for the record. Yes, I saw that reaction. It was concluded that while the state has shelter care, Jennifer Guskin and Scott McFalls are to maintain their parental rights, and supervised visitation of 1.5 hours twice a day was permitted. After court, DSS informed Jennifer that Iris was no longer to be breastfed, that she wasn't allowed to be present for feeding times. Jennifer expressed her extreme discomfort with DSS depriving Iris of one of the best forms of food for a growing infant, and demanded the records from the doctor who made that call. CPS continues to refuse to provide that information. Jennifer and Scott also made numerous requests throughout the fraudulent detainment of Iris McFalls for her to be provided with organic formula, diapers, and wipes. All requests have been ignored, and as such, DSS and the foster family has repeatedly assaulted Iris with known cancer-causing substances. It was at this point it became clear that Iris's health was endangered. Attached item 9 is the blood work from this day, from April 26, 2018, the day after CPS took Iris. Now, I'm going to show you a different documentation of the first day. I'm using these two records that I obtained after Iris was taken by CPS. This is obtained through a medical record copy that was gotten through CPS. Scott had consented for the release of Iris's medical records to go to CPS. In exchange, CPS would give the medical records to Scott's attorney, who would then release them in full to us. Well, we discovered in going through Iris's medical records that they did not release Iris's full medical records to us. They only released some of it. I will get into how we know that later. However, what I do want to present to you right now is attached item 9. This is from the day after CPS took Iris. This is in a different formatting than the first one I showed you because this is in comparison to the other one from the first day. So to give you a different image of the first day, this was April 12th, 2018. As you can see, one number is off. This, once again, is attached below. This is the day after CPS took Iris. This is what CPS concluded to be an improvement in health. Now, for those of you who aren't doctors, these highlighted areas are all things that have been flagged. As you'll be able to see on the top of the piece of paper over here, it'll say flag, and here's the range of where they prefer you to be, of where you should be, where you're supposed to be. This is the value of where you are when the blood work is drawn. And this flag is whether you are high out of the range or low out of the range. So as you can see here, Iris had one flag. On April 12th, when her medical decision was being made by me. This was the day after CPS took her. April 26th, when medical decision making was being made by Dr. Michelle Chudow. This is what CPS called an improvement in health. This is why I implore all of you, Freedom of Information Act request. Now, I also found out, I'll get into that. Give me a moment to get this back in the proper order, please. Sorry. I'm meticulous about certain things. Jennifer Guskin and Scott McFalls asked both of their lawyers to subpoena Iris's medical records. I was not content with the medical records being filtered through CPS. I wanted a subpoenaed copy. They refused to do so. Both attorneys refused to do so. Now, we weren't allowed to see Iris until April 29th, 2018. And then we were allowed to see Iris, and she was bruised and showed obvious signs of vaccine injury. Now, once again, you'll be able to see better version below. These are pictures of Iris's bruises on her hands. Yeah. That's what CPS did to her. And she showed obvious signs of vaccine injury. So here's the question. If she showed signs of vaccine injury, why did she have bruises on the back of her hands indicative of IVs? Did she have a severe enough reaction for the hospital need to give her IVs in her hands? How many other children have had that reaction and CPS covered the reaction up? And why is CPS still ordering more vaccinations? Would somebody like to answer this question? And why is Circuit Court of Baltimore County allowing it, permitting it, condoning it, signing off on it? Well, we're going to find out. I think we know. I think we already know. Bonuses and blackmail. You're not going to be there for much longer. Now, it's also known that people with a tongue and lip hygiene are more susceptible to vaccine injury, which is why we've been asking for Iris's genetic testing from the beginning. CPS continues to withhold it. May 2nd, 2018, Jennifer Guskin and Scott McFalls meet with DSS. DSS then Scott McFalls and Jennifer Guskin met with social worker Nicole Logan and her supervisor. Ms. Guskin and Mr. McFalls gave Nicole Logan a copy of Item 10, pictures of the bruises, as well as copies. I believe I gave him copies of the emails as well. I'm not 100% sure of that, but I'm pretty sure I did. I can't imagine I wouldn't have. DSS then informed Mr. McFalls and Miss Guskin that Iris was no longer to be breastfed. They refused to answer why, or any subsequent answers about who made that decision, when, or how they came to that conclusion. DSS said the decision was final and that they would look into providing the information. Blah, 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 blah. On May 3rd, visitation was extended to whenever we were supposed to be able to see her. May 7th, at the recommendation of my lawyer and of the foster care supervisor, Ben Levy, I had registered to the local Jewish community center and signed Iris and I up for baby and me classes on location. Once again, this was at the recommendation of my lawyer and the DSS supervisor. However, the foster family and the DSS supervisor refused to allow me to bring Iris to said baby and me classes. So I'm following the recommendations here, but not being allowed to follow the recommendations here. How many times has that happened? On May 8th, foster mother is questioned about misleading statements she made to Iris's doctors. Ultimately, we were receiving copies of the summaries from Iris's doctor's visits. On one, we saw where Dr. Fuller noted the foster mother, Jill McFalls, making statements along the line stating that she has continued distrust of me with Iris. Now, prior to this, Mrs. McFalls' only experience with Iris and I was when she invited herself to the hospital a few hours after I gave birth. I tolerated that. That was fine, whatever. I can deal with that. Now, all that she saw was me breastfeeding Iris or attempting to breastfeed Iris. That was the only thing Mrs. McFalls saw. Now, Mrs. McFalls is the same person who refused to breastfeed her children because it wasn't the cool thing to do. So, this is the same woman who was caught saying that she has continued distrust of me with Iris, based on the fact that she thinks I'm using her son for his money when I left Long Island. This is what I'm dealing with here. This is the mental aptitude that we're dealing with here. Now, when we question her about these statements, the conversation ended with the foster mother hitting Miss Guskin in the face as she grabbed Iris from Miss Guskin's arms and screaming, I have Iris, I have all the fucking control, before kicking Iris's parents' house. Before kicking Iris's parents out. This was brought to the attention of DSS, and the concern was expressed about the foster mother's out-of-control outburst. Due to the highly aggressive and confrontational behavior exhibited by the foster mother during visitation, Scott McFalls and Jennifer Guskin began making a request to have an additional visit conducted at an external location each week, supervised by the social worker Amanda Richardson. On May 17th, DSS withholds exculpatory evidence to continue the abuse of Iris. At court, it was brought to the attention of Mr. McFalls and Miss Guskin that DSS had Iris's medical record. However, they refused to release it to them. DSS had Iris's tongue and lip tie diagnosis, the blood work from April 12th through April 26th. The fact that the parents were in agreement with plan of care, you'll see here later. We are having ongoing non-transparent conversations with DSS about Iris and her family, and the medical recommendation that Iris continue to be breastfed, but they knowingly and willingly withheld it from the court in order to justify the further abuse of a then 5-month-old infant. Due to the court's ruling for a mental health evaluation, Jennifer Guskin informed DSS that she needed to see a female doctor due to being raped by a male psychologist as a child. After 4 months of DSS scheduling Miss Guskin to see a female doctor was finally contacted and scheduled for the end of September. On May 30th, after weeks of requesting, we received the partial medical records from CPS with information missing. Jennifer Guskin and Scott McFalls find the genetic information missing to be of great concern, as tongue and lip tie is a genetic trait and can easily verify that it was indeed most likely the cause of Iris's lack of weight gain. June 4th, 2018, ignoring the obvious signs of vaccine injury, DSS attempts to vaccinate Iris again, and they filed for child support when consent is not obtained. June 5th, 2018, the foster family will not allow the parents to attend the infants and toddlers referral. Part of the recommendations was that Iris received an infants and toddlers referral. The foster mother, in violation of the court order, prohibits me from attending this referral. Now, upon receiving a copy of the medical records from the referral through Dr. Fuller's office later on, I found out that the foster mother lied to the infants and toddlers referral, stating that Iris's lack of weight gain was due to myself, and completely ignored the tongue and lip tie diagnosis on medical record. Once again, blaming Iris's lack of weight gain on me, and refusing to ignore the fact that it was a genetic trait. June 6th, 2018. Baltimore County Police Department assaults Jennifer Guskin. This doesn't really have much to do with CPS. However, I do want to get into a personal speculation that I have. I cannot prove it. I am looking forward to proving it. I will be able to do so when that subpoena is filed. And when that subpoena is signed, I should say. That subpoena is filed. Oh boy, it's filed. I'm waiting for it to be signed. Now, part of my speculation for this is when the police came to my house. You can see the video somewhere in my other videos. You can look and you'll find it somewhere. But at one point, Officer Thompson walks away to make a phone call to somebody. I have not been able to verify who this phone call was, to whom it was, and all this kind of stuff. I've not been able to verify why this escalated out of control as quickly as it did. The theory that I have, and yes, it's just a theory, is that DSS or CPS had some sort of involvement with why the police escalated things as quickly as they did. I do not currently have proof of this speculation. However, when I am able to pull that information with the subpoena, I will get that answer, and I will get that answer to you. So I'm also, throughout all of this, as you guys know, there's a pending subpoena to be signed. I'm going to be getting a lot of information with that subpoena. So, June 20th, 2018. Foster care supervisor Ben Levy cuts visitation from whenever Iris parents wants to 1 hour once a week, and we were never given a reason why. Now, if the court orders that we are to be able to see Iris whenever we want, doesn't that mean that cutting visitation is a violation of the court order and contempt of court? Yes. Okay then. Now, when this occurred, both Scott and I asked the supervisor. We asked him multiple questions. Have you seen Iris's medical record? Who prohibited Iris from being breastfed? Why? The medical records state that we were in agreement with the plan of care. Why hasn't Iris been returned? Why aren't you providing her organic formula? The blood reports show that Iris was healthier in our care than DSS's care. Why hasn't this been addressed? What caused the bruises on the back of Iris's hands? And Mr. Levy's response to any questions were, I will not litigate this with you. When it was explained that Iris was fed organic food and using organic diapers and was asked why she wasn't being given the same standard of care, Mr. Levy's response was, and I quote, "You don't get extra points for being a good parent," end quote. In other words, back on June 20th, he acknowledged that the standard of care that we were giving was good, better than what they were. But Iris was still kept in foster care. July 18th, 2018. Corey Guskin sends Jennifer Guskin and Scott McFalls, Corey Guskin being my father, sends Jennifer Guskin and Scott McFalls threatening text messages stating that if Jennifer continues speaking about the abuse she endured as a child at Corey's hands, that he would make statements to the court that Jennifer is not capable of raising Iris. Corey Guskin was subsequently arrested in an unrelated offense of impersonating a law enforcement officer. Now I'm going to go on a small, tiny tangent on this one for just a few moments. This needs to be said, and this is going to be said. While I was pregnant with Iris, I began having flashbacks. I realized that I've been pregnant multiple times before. I had flashbacks of being pregnant twice when I was in elementary school, when I was in grade school. I got my period for the first time in 3rd grade. I got pregnant in 4th grade. And I got pregnant again either in 5th grade or 6th grade. The first child, I believe, was a stillbirth. The second one was adopted, aka sold, by my family. I'm about 95% certain that one of those children was my father's. My adoptive father. Not my biological father. My adoptive father. So, I believe that's why he made these threatening statements and these threatening text messages. Because he doesn't want the truth coming out. None of them want the truth coming out. So guess what? Here comes the truth. August 2018. Iris was taken out of the state by the foster family against our wishes. The foster family took Iris to New Hampshire. We were not told when, where, how long, with whom they would be, or why. Due to this, there was a week where Iris did not have visitation with her parents. August 10th, 2018. The care plan provided by CPS, a month overdue. Mr. Levy finally provides the care plan from DSS, and once again Mr. Levy continues to ignore the medical records, insisting on the repeated false accusations already levied against Miss Guskin and Mr. McFalls. September 19th, Jennifer Guskin receives a comprehensive mental health evaluation. DSS refuses to release the results. Now, DSS has already shown a recollection to alter documents. I wasn't letting this get handed over straight to DSS. That's not happening. So as stated in the consent form that they put, I understand that a formal report of this evaluation will be sent directly to the Baltimore County Department of Social Services, and that the department will then in turn release copies of the report to the court and the attorneys involved in the case. Attached to item 12. Due to, quote, concerns that we were having ongoing non-transparent conversations with DSS about Iris and her family, as indicated in Iris's medical records, as well as the numerous omissions from Iris's medical record, Ms. Guskin and Mr. McFalls are not comfortable consenting to DSS receiving the only original copy of said evaluations, and they are willing to sign the consent form only if they are to receive a copy of the results as well. Mr. Levy found this to be unacceptable and refused to pay for the evaluation if Jennifer Guskin and Scott McFalls receive a copy as well. Throughout the month of October, the foster family hid a severe diaper rash that Iris had. So severe that they had to bring her to a doctor. But that doctor was not Iris's normal doctor, once again in violation of the court order. October 24th, 2018. Visitation for Friday, October 26th, was canceled. Oh, and Iris was sick throughout the month of October. Iris has been sick for about 2 months now. October 24th, 2018, a visitation for Friday, October 25th, canceled. Social worker Hunter Caskey called Miss Guskin and informed her that despite the fact that the foster mother had planned to bring Iris to court on October 25th, the foster mother would no longer be doing so. At this time, the foster mother also canceled the scheduled weekly visitation for Friday, October 26th. The foster mother refuses to provide a reason for this cancellation. This would be the second weekly visitation canceled due to the foster family putting themselves before Iris's best interest. For those who are wondering, this is kyanite. Kyanite is a crystal that helps people with speaking. So, that's what this is. Judge me, I don't care. October 25th, 2018, CINA review hearing. Iris is to remain in foster care. The court tentatively orders vaccinations. October 26th. I'll stay on October 25th for now. We had a review hearing in front of Magistrate Schenkner at Baltimore County Baltimore County Circuit Court. Despite the fact that I submitted almost all of this evidence, a few small things like this, in particular, the 1983 civil action for deprivation of human rights was not submitted. The medical records and stuff was. The CINA review hearing occurred. Ms. Guskin submitted the following statement and attached evidence to the court. DSS continues to allege mental health issues despite Mr. Levy's refusal to provide Ms. Guskin's evaluation to the court. A compromise was made between counsel that the results will be released to the court and then disseminated amongst counsel. After the hearing, Ms. Guskin stipulated that she wants the evaluation released in a sealed and certified fashion directly to Magistrate Schenkner's custody. The foster family finally consents to giving Iris organic food. It becomes evident that Iris's attorney, Christina Hudgens, has not read Iris's medical records and is not adequately informed of this case, as she has asked the court if the medical records Ms. Guskin provided had been verified and certified accurate. CSS still refuses to answer why Iris was prohibited from being breastfed, and requests that the court orders Iris be vaccinated again, ignoring the obvious signs of vaccine injury. Despite Ms. Guskin's pleas, to stay in order of vaccinations, /execution, knowing how bad her reaction was, I'm sorry, these are attempted murder. That's what these are. Each and every one. So that means Magistrate Schenkner and Judge Bailey. Judge Bailey is the judge who signed off on this. Magistrate Schenkner is the one who did not provide Judge Bailey with the evidence showing Judge Bailey what a bad idea it was to sign off on this. Despite Ms. Guskin's pleas to stay in order of execution, the court tentatively grants the request with a stipulation that Ms. Guskin has 1 week to obtain unaltered and complete medical records and show proof of negative reaction or potential underlying condition that can cause a negative reaction. Now, once again, multiple requests from DSS to be able to get genetic testing done for Iris. Once again, each request for genetic testing done has been ignored. I'm not going to get into the visitation. I'm not going to get into the visitation issues with the foster mother here. That's all written down. That's all been submitted. You guys can read this if you want. However, I do want to state this for the record. The foster family spent visits threatening Iris and her mother with statements such as, quote, "You are not getting Iris back," end quote. Quote, "She is better off without you." Quote, "You are starving her and don't deserve to see her again." Quote, "I am going to be adopting Iris and raising her as my own." Quote, "I am going to be Iris's mother, not you." Quote, I don't care what's in the medical records. I'm going to make sure you never get her back. Quote, make Iris's life easier and go kill yourself. And quote, I have Iris. I have all the fucking control. And in response to being told Miss Guskin's history as a human trafficking survivor, Mrs. McFalls' response was, I don't care. That's not my problem. Now, this is problematic. A foster family is supposed to help working towards reunification. They're supposed to be working with the people who don't have the child. These kind of comments from anybody, none of the less your own mother-in-law, you psychotic bitch, is inexcusable. If Scott's own mother said this in reference to her own granddaughter, what have other foster families done to people that they're not even related to? How many other situations like this happened where the grandparents were able to watch the child, but because they weren't vindictive enough, CPS wouldn't let them watch the child, and they would only let vindictive parents watch the child? How many times has CPS convinced people to lie on their behalf? Upon the beginning of each visit, Iris was on the floor of the residence while the foster mother was on the couch on her phone, talking about the purchases she just made. It was extremely rare that the foster parents ever interacted with Iris. Iris repeatedly presented with diaper rash as well as bruises before ever even becoming mobile, indicating neglect and outright possible abuse in foster care. Although Miss Guskin ignored these comments, they progressed into acts of violence from the foster mother against Miss Guskin, with shoving and accidentally hitting Miss Guskin with items and objects, making crude comments about how Miss Guskin is always in the way. Despite the constant onslaught of attacks by the foster family, Miss Guskin would not engage. Scott McFalls and Jennifer Guskin made repeated requests to the foster family that pictures of Iris not be placed on the internet, due to the fact that people with ill intentions use those pictures to facilitate the kidnapping of that child. The foster family responded by sending and posting pictures of Iris all over the place. The foster mother made numerous comments about how she sent what she referred to as her spies to follow us around and harass us when out in public. This confirmed my suspicion, Miss Guskin's suspicion, about the neighbors, who had recently taken up a habit of having extremely loud conversations in front of the house, having something to do with this case. The foster mother laughed about knowing Miss Guskin had PTSD and expressed her hopes that her friends would drive Miss Guskin to commit suicide, which had become an occurring theme with DSS and the foster family, constantly telling Miss Guskin that Iris would be better off with Jennifer dead and encouraging Jennifer to commit suicide. This brings up another interesting point. How many parents committed suicide because of the actions of DSS and affiliates? How many children have committed suicide because of the actions of DSS and affiliates? There are damages we will never be able to undo. But what we can do is we can move forward, making sure that this kind of stuff never happens again. The behavior of the foster family caused Miss Guskin and Mr. McFalls to request that an additional visit be conducted by Miss Richardson at an alternative location without the presence of the foster family. Once Amanda Richardson began conducting visitation, they became significantly easier. However, this did not occur until after Mr. Levy inexplicably changed visitation. Despite the fact that Mr. McFalls and Miss Guskin repeatedly asked Miss Richardson if she had any constructive criticisms about their interaction with Iris, the only one that she had was that Iris's parents would have to give Iris space and accept that she's going to fall and bump herself once in a while. In a statement written in a majority by the foster care supervisor, Ben Levy, social worker Amanda Richardson submits, quote, "Parents bring a blanket and a few age-appropriate toys for Iris and play soft music for her during their time together. Both parents are active and engaged as Iris crawls throughout the library, exploring her surroundings. Iris is often mesmerized by the parents' necklaces or glasses. They allow Iris time and space to explore such items with no frustration. The parents appear in tune with her basic needs. She is diapered and fed as needed during every visit with no coaching from the supervising worker. This indicates that all interactions end quote. This indicates that all interactions between Miss Guskin and Iris are appropriate, and other than the allegations of mental health issues due to Miss Guskin's demands for transparency, there is no concern for either DSS or the court for Iris in her parents' care. Despite this, Iris remains in foster care. Although Miss Guskin had her PTSD well managed and under control prior to the fraudulent removal of Iris, Miss Guskin has been seeing a mental health professional, Laura Lane, twice a week due to the massive increase in anxiety and stress because of DSS's actions. Miss Lane writes, quote, "In the past 3 months, she, Miss Jennifer Guskin, has demonstrated significant strength despite overwhelming fear at having her daughter taken away from her. Her mental status is good and she does not demonstrate any delusional thoughts and behaviors, and she is able to provide capable care for her daughter." Attached item 13. Throughout this time, Jennifer Guskin and Scott McFalls presented medical record evidence to Mr. Levy and the foster agents. It is extremely worrisome that Mr. Levy and the foster family are so willing to dismiss documented medical records while gladly exposing Iris to known cancer-causing substances. They were also gladly ignoring the clear harm to Iris's physical, mental, and emotional health, keeping her away from her parents, as well as severely damaging her development by making up outright falsehoods to justify their ongoing abuse of an infant. It should be even more alarming throughout all of this, DSS has made blanket accusations about Jennifer Guskin and Scott McFalls' mental health due to their decisions made based on the facts represented in medical records. It is due to the actions of Baltimore County Department of Social Services, Baltimore County Police Department, Baltimore County Circuit Court, Howard County General Hospital, and the Greater Baltimore Medical Center, as well as the criminal nature of this case, that Ms. Guskin has been in contact with multiple federal and state agencies, including the Department of Homeland Security, the Federal Bureau of Investigations, the Central Intelligence Agency, Department of Justice, and the Office of Inspector General, seeking a criminal investigation into all aforementioned and affiliated parties involved in this case. As you can see, on the end of this is a list of recommendations. Attached is also the evidence. Now, this is the primary submission. This is what is currently sealed. However, the judge allowed me to submit this without it being sealed. It's a continuation onto this right here. Oh, is this the updated one? Sorry, give me a second. No, this is not the updated one. It's okay. Sorry. Now, here's an updated affidavit / statement of fact. This is about what occurred after the October 25th hearing. Now, I added on to it slightly under October 26th, meeting and walkthrough with no social worker. Now, the new social worker that we have right now, Hunter Caskey, when she came on and took on the case, I presented the evidence to her. And I said, would you like to come to the house and do a walkthrough of the house? I'd really like some constructive criticism on, what we can do to improve Iris's situation so that way when she does come home, we're ready for her. So, Ms. Caskey on October 26th came to the house and did a walkthrough of the house. The only criticism that Ms. Caskey had of the home was that one wire was draped out of the front door for an inflatable Halloween decoration on the front yard, which was removed within 48 hours of Halloween ending. Of Iris's room, Ms. Caskey said, and I quote, "It's perfect." October 29th. Federal cases filed. Friday, November 2nd. Forced vaccination scheduled. The foster family refuses to reschedule. Now, at court on October 25th, the DSS and the foster care supervisor and Iris's attorney were instructed to release Iris's information to us and to give her genetic testing if we wanted to. Well, CPS refused to do that. They continued to withhold evidence. They refused to do the genetic testing, and they scheduled the vaccinations anyway. Friday, November 2nd, 2018. Forced vaccination scheduled. The foster family refuses to reschedule. Now, we have clear and obvious signs of vaccine injury. Foster family saw this. They knew this. They didn't care. They pushed to continue with the vaccinations. Despite repeated text messages and requests to conduct blood and genetic testing on Iris prior to being vaccination, the foster family and CPS refused and took it upon themselves to schedule Iris's vaccinations. Tuesday, November 6, 2018. Despite obvious signs of vaccine injury, CPS and the foster family forced vaccinations. Even though the courts were closed and there was no way to verify the legitimacy of said signatures, Mr. Levy presented a court order signed by Magistrate Schenkner and Judge Bailey to force vaccinations on Iris. Thursday, November 8th, 2018. Visitation with Iris, and she already shows signs of vaccine injury. Iris is far less coordinated than usual. She seems almost drunk. Her arms are being held very tightly at her shoulders, and she seems to be having difficulty moving. This is observed by the mother, father, and social worker. The foster family still refuses to answer any questions which may improve Iris's quality of life, her diaper size, favorite food, etc. The foster family no longer sends Iris to visitation with food, diaper, or toys, effectively prohibiting Iris's parents from being able to provide for Iris. November 13th, 2018. More motions filed. That's not important. Oh, this is fun. Thursday and Friday, November 15th through 16th, 2018. Call it for court for Baltimore County assault. Due to court, visitation needed to be rescheduled. Ms. Caskey was willing to do so for the next day, Friday. This is about the assault that the police officers did on me. You guys will get to read all this. I'm not getting into that. I'm getting drained by it. I'm sorry, guys. Ultimately, this gets into how, while we were at court, it was brought to our attention that the foster care supervisor decided to start making demands that I get another psychological evaluation from somebody who wasn't the one that he previously scheduled me with. So the foster care supervisor starts making demands in a case that is completely unassociated with his case. There's no reason for him to be making demands at all whatsoever. So he starts interfering in an unrelated criminal investigation. It was also on the same day where Mr. Levy did not have the charges that he wanted. It seems as though he wanted something on my record to be able to use against me. He was not able to do so. On the same day that he was not able to do so, Mr. Levy filed to have visitation terminated, due to the Baltimore County Police Department assault. And because I live streamed the day of the vaccinations. The day that they vaccinated Iris without the proper testing. So, a CPS files for contempt of court. Despite the fact that the judge ordered despite the judge's explicit order to Mr. Levy, he has refused to uphold a single solitary direction given by the court, and has been caught outright lying on multiple occasions. However, he is now attempting to have Miss Guskin held in contempt of court. There is an emergency hearing in regards to visitation, scheduled for November 29, 2018. Since court in October 25th, Sorry, I lost my spot. So, since court on October 25th, 2018, CPS and the foster family had cut 3 out of 4 visitations, going in direct violation of Magistrate Schenkner's orders. So, after Iris showed obvious signs of vaccine injury, CPS then cuts visitation for 2 weeks. So, even though Magistrate Schenkner explicitly ordered the court that we are to be able to see Iris after the vaccinations to make sure that she wasn't injured, CPS cut visitation for 2 weeks, probably to hide the vaccine injury. So once again, CPS is hiding exculpatory evidence from the court. Despite the fact that CPS and the foster family has constantly and habitually violated the court order, the moment CPS finds flaw in something Ms. Guskin does, even if it isn't an actual violation of said court order, the court jumps at the chance to further prosecute Ms. Guskin and her family. On October 29th, Iris's attorney, Christina Hudgens, attempted to terminate visitation at the behest of Mr. Levy. Judge Catherine Cox ultimately scolded CPS and told them that due to the fact that we were in the reunification phase, she would not be cutting visitation. However, visitation is to be conducted at the Department of Social Services. On November 30th, Ms. Guskin emailed her attorney, Lee Jacobson. Her new attorney, Lee Jacobson, I had fired Ralph Sapia prior due to ineffective counsel. I was assigned a new attorney by, what's it called? The Legal Defense, Baltimore County Legal Defense, Public Defender's Office. Public Defender's Office. Now, I am going to state for the record that I did not want to get an attorney. I wanted to deal with this myself. I did not want to have to go through all this with a fucking attorney because the attorney has been hamstringing me the entire fucking time. Because all these attorneys are complicit. All these judges are complicit. All these social workers are complicit. Why the hell am I going to say to somebody, hi, I know you're complicit in all of this, but please help. But, sorry honey, I have to do this to you. Scott fucking insisted. He insisted and insisted and insisted and insisted. And yes, I'm pissed. I digress. Miss Guskin emailed her attorney, Lee Jacobson, to let him know that the thought of having visitation at a location Miss Guskin associates with a human trafficking epicenter would be detrimental to her mental health, and attempting to force her to do so will likely cause a severe breakdown. Miss Guskin asked that Mr. Jacobson appeal the decision to offer an alternative location. Ultimately, Mr. Jacobson refused to do so. Now, I do want to go into something else. There are a few other things here. Not really going to get into it. I haven't updated it for the information on December 13th. December 13th is a child support hearing. So, CPS is asking for child support. They are literally asking us to pay them because they took a child, this one right here. They took that child, that baby, that infant, against medical advice and under false pretenses, and did this. And CPS wants us to pay child support. I kid you not. So, on December 13th, 2018, Scott went in for his child support hearing. CPS, now mind you, we're there for that child support hearing. More than half of that docket is CPS, is foster care versus a parent. Meaning, more than half of those cases on that docket were was a child in foster care who was already being paid for by federal funding. CPS is attempting to double dip by taking children under false pretenses, making them sick, receiving federal funding to do so, and then extorting their parents. So on December 13th, 2018, it was determined that I'm on disability. I don't have to pay child support. But it was determined that Scott has to pay $737 a month in child support for them to assault and abuse an infant child. They want Scott to pay $737 a month and and they want to backdate it to June. Now, CPS has until December 21st until my judge is going to sign these motions that I have. And if my judge has to sign those motions, you're not going to be happy. It's very, very clear. Been made very, very clear from multiple people. No deals. Now this case, this one right here, is seeking a criminal investigation into CPS. Because if they can take an overall healthy child, if they can open up a fraudulent fucking case, take a child against medical advice, make the child sick, and repeatedly assault the child with vaccines, ignoring obvious signs of vaccine injury, lie to the court, and then extort the parents. This is extortion. This is extortion. This is either shut up, or we are taking your child, and we are taking your money, we are taking your home, we are taking your livelihood. CPS goes after people's jobs. And guess what? If I didn't have my SSI paying for the mortgage, we wouldn't be able to keep a roof over our head. Right now, we don't know how we're going to make ends meet. Because CPS took our daughter, opened up a fraudulent case, took our daughter against medical advice, made her sick, and have kept her in foster care for 7 months, 8 months. For those who are wondering why, there's currently a warrant for your arrest. That answers that. So this has gone on far, far, far long enough. This isn't particularly important. Fine. So for those who have the means to, I should probably upload this as well. Actually, you know what? I think I'll upload this as well. This is the court orders that the judge will probably sign on the 21st, which also included in that, because the judge decided to initiate the Tucker Act, which means that everybody involved in this case does not have immunity anymore. So Magistrate Farmer, who decided to, Magistrate Farmer and Judge Finifer, I'm not going to pronounce that correctly, fuck it. Magistrate Farmer is also getting added to this list. But on December 21st, 2018, if the judge chooses to sign this order, the following content is ordered to take immediate effect. Emergency injunction stopping all forced vaccinations. Requirement that vaccine injury symptoms be reported to the Vaccine Adverse Effect Reporting System. Enactment of executive order blocking the property of persons involved in human rights abuse or corruption against DSS and affiliated agencies until a comprehensive independent investigation can be completed. An emergency injunction halting child removals until a full and complete review of all cases, active and inactive, within the Department of Social Services can be independently investigated for similar criminal behavior. So in closing, I'm going to say this. FOIA. I have a FOIA request in. It's currently being reviewed by the Office of Inspector General. Right now, that judge, if my judge signs that subpoena, if our judge signs that subpoena, I will be pulling everything that I can You guys need to know what you can do to fight. But you need to put in your Freedom of Information Act requests, whether you are actively fighting CPS or not. Put them in for your medical records. Because guess what? If I had a competent attorney who was actually willing to present the medical records, i.e. myself, she probably would have been returned a hell of a lot faster. But if your case is open fraudulently and you think medical records can help, make sure that you subpoena a certified copy. Certified. It's not certified. It's not really admissible in court. You want certified. Anyway, guys, this has gone on long enough. I have completely exhausted myself. I don't even know. I hope this is enough. I hope this is good enough. All right. On that note, I don't know what else to put on here. I don't know what else to say. Yeah, guys, please put in your FOIA requests. That's extremely important. Expect it to take a while. There's probably going to be a lot of requests going in. But, guys, this is being looked into. And for those of you who are on Team Dead Iris, yes, you are Team Dead Iris. You will be held accountable. Each and every one of you. Because this case isn't going away. And neither am I. As far as I'm concerned, all this is this shows the actions that CPS does to take children away from their parents. All this does is expose what you do. These may be my experiences. But these are not just to myself. I'm not the only one who's gone through this. So as far as I'm concerned, well, on paper, this might be Guskin versus the U.S. government. As far as I'm concerned, this is we the people versus CPS and human trafficking. So on that note, guys, I don't really think I have much more to add to this. This will be linked down below. I got nothing else. So, I hope you had a great weekend. Have a wonderful week. This is supposed to be a big week. It sure looks like it. Oh my God. I don't even. Oh, one thing I did want to say. Unfortunately, I'm not going to be able to attend General Flynn's sentencing tomorrow morning. I will be with you in much spirit, good vibes, love, light. I guess to a degree, I consider him to be family, because he's also been persecuted by an absolutely corrupt, fucked up system. So to a degree, I feel a lot of camaraderie with him. And I really wanted to go. But something came up, an appointment. It's more important. So I won't be there in person, but I'll be there in spirit. Anyway, big week, guys. A lot going on. So get ready, get prepared, and thank you to everybody who's helping to make this happen. I'm not really sure how to handle everything that's going on. On that note, I feel sick, so I love you. Take care. Where we go, one we go all.